The ship glided through the void of space, its hull cutting through the darkness like a knife. Dorian Vale sat alone at the helm, his fingers trembling over the controls. His once unshakable resolve was now a distant memory, replaced with doubt. This was no ordinary mission. The distress signal had arrived, an encrypted message from a lost colony, now swallowed by the vastness of space. "Help, we're running out of time." The words echoed in his mind as his gaze fixed on the dimly lit console in front of him. A surge of dread gripped his chest. "We're here," Dorian muttered under his breath. But will they still be here? The silence around him was deafening, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. Behind him his crew silently waited, all too aware of the tension. Miri, his first officer, stood by, her face a mask of calm, but Dorian could feel the weight of her concern. She approached, her footsteps quiet but purposeful. "You okay?" she asked softly. He didn't respond, his eyes never leaving the screens. What had they stumbled upon? The ship continued its silent voyage, drifting through the cold expanse. Outside, stars blinked like distant beacons, but inside, tension was palpable. Every creak of the hull, every soft hum of the systems, seemed to echo louder than it should. Dorian's mind raced with the implications of the distress call. He glanced at the view screen, but the vast emptiness of space offered no answers, only more questions. "Do you think they're still out there?" Miri asked, her voice breaking the stillness. Her question hung in the air, too heavy for an answer. Dorian remained silent, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "If they are, we'll find them," he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. The truth was, he wasn't sure they would. His gut twisted at the thought of failure. They were so close now, but the fear of what they might find, or worse, what they might not find, gnawed at him. "We're in this together," Miri said softly, as if sensing his inner turmoil. Dorian turned to face her, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Let's hope that's enough," he muttered. Suddenly, the calm was broken by a sharp beep from the navigation console. Dorian's heart skipped a beat as the screen flashed to life with new data. A ripple in the fabric of space, a signal disruption. He leaned forward, his fingers dancing over the controls, trying to decipher what was happening. "What is it?" Miri asked, concern rising in her voice. "An anomaly," Dorian muttered. His brow furrowed as he adjusted the settings. "It's like something's interfering with our sensors." The console flickered again, the data shifting, impossible to decode. Miri moved closer, her eyes scanning the screen. "Is it the colony?" she asked. Dorian didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. It was unlike anything he had encountered before. An interference, yes, but something more, something wrong. The ship suddenly shuddered, the lights dimming momentarily. A growl of static filled the cockpit. "Stay calm," Dorian ordered, though his own voice betrayed him. They were on the edge of something far more dangerous than they had ever expected. The ship sailed further into the anomaly, and the silence that followed the chaos felt even heavier. Dorian could sense it now, a presence, something watching them. The void outside the ship seemed to stretch endlessly, like a living thing. "We shouldn't be here," Miri said, her voice barely a whisper. Dorian didn't answer, the words felt too real. The anomaly had pulled them deeper into the darkness, and it was no longer just a disturbance in the sensors. It was a palpable force, something unnatural. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being pulled toward something. But what? The colony? Or something else, something far worse? The ship shook again, a low, guttural rumble reverberating through the walls. "Prepare for a scan," Dorian commanded, his voice tight. But even as he spoke, the thought nagged at him. What if the scan revealed something they weren't ready to face? The scan results came in, and they were worse than anything Dorian had anticipated. "It's not just interference," Miri said, her voice a mix of disbelief and horror. "This is something else." The readings were incomprehensible, unlike any natural anomaly. It was as if the fabric of space itself had been warped. "What does that mean?" Dorian asked, though he feared the answer. Miri hesitated before responding. There's something here, Captain. Something alive. The air in the cockpit grew colder, and Dorian's heart sank. The lost colony, the source of the distress signal, had been swallowed by this entity. This creature. But why? What had it wanted with them? The ship shook again, more violently this time. The stars outside had all but disappeared, leaving nothing but blackness. Get us out of here, Dorian commanded, his voice shaking. But deep down he knew it was too late. They had already become part of something much bigger. Dorian's heart raced as the ship continued to shudder, the eerie void outside pressing in on them. The cockpit's control systems had gone haywire, the once orderly readouts now flashing chaotic patterns. The crew was on edge, their faces pale as they tried to make sense of the disturbance. We need answers, Dorian muttered, though his voice barely rose above a whisper. What's out there? Miri's voice was sharp with urgency. It's like nothing we've ever encountered before. The readings, they're completely off the charts. She glanced at the other crew members, but no one spoke. All eyes were fixed on the view screen, the emptiness outside seemingly closing in around them. Then, as if in response to their silent questions, something stirred in the dark. The ship shook violently, its systems flickering, the intercom buzzing with static. A strange low hum began to emanate from the depths of the void. Dorian's grip tightened on the console. Brace yourselves, he commanded, though he wasn't sure if it would be enough. Something was coming, and it wasn't friendly. The strange hum grew louder, vibrating through the ship's metal frame. A voice, distorted and alien, began to resonate from the depths of space, though no one could pinpoint where it was coming from. It was neither male nor female, neither human nor creature, but something in between, echoing across the crew's minds. We see you. The words were a chorus of whispers, layered and incomprehensible. Miri recoiled from the sound, clutching her head. What is that? She gasped. Dorian stood frozen, the hairs on his neck standing on end. The voice seemed to come from everywhere surrounding them. It was neither a warning nor a threat, but a statement, a chilling acknowledgement of their presence. It's trying to communicate, Dorian muttered, his voice low and haunted. He glanced at Miri. We have to find out what it wants. The crew was silent, unsure of how to proceed. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on them, suffocating the air. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing the crew off balance. Alarms blared and the view outside the cockpit was consumed by a swirling mass of energy, tendrils of dark force reaching out toward them. Dorian gritted his teeth, slamming his hands down on the control panel, in an attempt to stabilize the ship. Hold on, he yelled, though his words were lost in the chaos. The ship bucked again, its metal frame groaning under the strain. Miri shouted over the noise, "The anomaly! It's pulling us in!" The crew scrambled to secure themselves, but the gravity of the situation was overwhelming. The ship's engine sputtered, struggling to keep them afloat in the face of the anomaly's gravitational pull. "We can't fight this," Dorian shouted. "We need to break free." But the anomaly was relentless, its power drawing them deeper into the void. A sense of helplessness washed over Dorian, but there was no time to dwell on it. They had to survive. The ship was no longer flying straight. It was spinning, helpless in the grasp of the anomaly. Dorian could feel his stomach churn as the stars outside twisted and bent, their light warping into impossible shapes. "We're losing control," Miri said, her voice shaking. "Can't make sense of the readings." The stars outside the window seemed to bend and twist in strange patterns, creating a disorienting kaleidoscope of light. It felt as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. Dorian's mind raced, but he couldn't keep up. His thoughts scattered, unable to focus on the immediate task at hand. "Something's happening to us," he said, almost to himself. The crew was disoriented, their senses overwhelmed by the shifting, impossible landscape outside. A sense of impending doom hung in the air, and Dorian felt a cold sweat trickle down his neck. "We need to escape," he murmured, but deep down he knew that they might already be lost. The ship had been drawn to the heart of the anomaly, and there was no turning back now. Dorian's eyes darted between the consoles as the last of their power reserves began to drain. "This is it," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm of static and noise that filled the cockpit. "We're going to die here." Miri's gaze was fixed on him, her face pale. "No, we have to find a way out. There has to be something we can do." But the words felt hollow. The ship was nearing the core of the anomaly now, the stars outside completely obscured by a pulsating, shifting mass of energy. The crew had stopped fighting. They simply watched, their faces reflecting the same sense of dread. Dorian felt the weight of his failure pressing down on him, and for a moment he wondered if this was how it would all end. But even in the face of impending doom, he couldn't give up. "We're not dead yet," he muttered, forcing himself to act. The ship lurched again, this time more violently, as though the anomaly itself were reaching for them. Dorian gritted his teeth, his hands white-knuckling the control panel. "Hold on," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos around them. The sound of groaning metal filled the cockpit, each creak and tremor adding to the mounting sense of doom. "It's not going to hold much longer," Miri said, her voice strained, eyes darting between the systems that were quickly failing. Dorian didn't respond. He couldn't. Outside, the anomaly's swirling mass grew more insistent, its pulse quickening as if it were alive. The stars were gone now, replaced by a thick, oppressive dark energy that seemed to claw at the ship. Dorian's mind raced. What is this thing? He felt a cold sweat form on his brow. There was no time left. The ship was almost at the center of the anomaly, and whatever lay there, they were about to meet it face to face. "Prepare for impact," Dorian muttered under his breath, though he wasn't sure if it was a command or a prayer. As the ship fell deeper into the heart of the anomaly, the environment inside began to change. The walls of the cockpit, once metallic and rigid, now appeared to warp and stretch. A low hum filled the air, resonating deep in the bones of the crew. Suddenly, a voice not human, but somehow familiar, reverberated through the ship, sending a chill down Dorian's spine. "We see you, Captain. We have been waiting." The voice was not on any speaker. It wasn't from the ship's systems, it was inside their minds. Miri gasped, her hands shaking. "It's speaking directly to us," she whispered. "What does it want?" Dorian's heart pounded. "I don't know," he replied. "But we need to figure it out. We can't let it control us." As the crew sat frozen, the energy outside grew even more intense, the very air around them charged with unseen forces. They were no longer just victims of the anomaly, they were trapped in its presence, and it was watching them. The air in the cockpit felt heavy, pressing down on them. It wasn't just the physical sensation of the anomaly, it was as though something was reaching for them, clawing at their minds. "It's inside my head," Miri whispered, her voice trembling. "I can feel it. It's in my thoughts." Dorian turned to her, his face a mask of concern. "Don't listen to it," he said urgently. "We have to stay focused." But it was becoming harder and harder to resist. The voice echoed in their minds, promising knowledge, power, and answers. "You will understand soon, Captain. Come closer." The temptation to give in was overwhelming, and Dorian could feel his will weakening. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog that had descended over his mind. The ship groaned again, its systems flickering, and in that moment, Dorian realized they were not just passengers in this anomaly. They were its prisoners, and it was tightening its grip. The pressure inside the cockpit was unbearable. The ship was no longer just a vessel in space. It had become a cage, and the anomaly, a predator that circled around them. Dorian could feel his mind slipping, the constant whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Give in to us, Captain. Accept the knowledge." Miri was no better off. She staggered to her feet, her voice ragged. "It's too much, Dorian. We can't fight it." The crew members around them were no longer just disoriented. They were panicked, some even crying out in fear. "We need to stay together," Dorian shouted, trying to rally them. But the voices only grew louder, drowning out his commands. He could feel his own resolve weakening as the ship hurtled deeper into the void, toward an unknown fate. He had never felt so helpless, and the worst part was, he didn't know if they could make it out of this alive. Just as Dorian thought they were beyond saving, a sudden flash of light cut through the darkness, blinding him for a moment. The ship's systems, already on the brink of collapse, seemed to stabilize. The hum of the anomaly softened, as if something had intervened. "What's happening?" Miri gasped, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "I don't know," Dorian replied, his voice hoarse. The ship's view screen flickered to life, showing a strange but somehow familiar symbol, the crest of a long-lost civilization. A voice not the entity's, but one familiar and warm, crackled through the static. "You are not alone, Captain. We are here." It was the hidden ally, the one who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. They weren't completely alone in this battle. There was hope. But at what cost? The ship had stabilized, but the atmosphere in the cockpit was still tense. The voice of the hidden ally echoed in Dorian's mind, leaving him with more questions than answers. "We are here to help, Captain, but you must trust us." The symbol from the long-lost civilization was still glowing on the console, its presence a beacon in the darkness. But Dorian couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else at play here, something hidden within the depths of the anomaly that they hadn't yet seen. "Who are you?" Dorian muttered, his voice low. "Why are you helping us?" There was no immediate response, just the hum of the ship's systems. Miri, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Maybe we should trust them, Dorian. We don't have many choices left." But Dorian wasn't so sure. As the ship continued to drift deeper into the heart of the anomaly, the feeling that they were being guided, not rescued, gnawed at him. "I want to believe that," he said, "but I'm not sure we can." The ship continued its slow, almost inevitable journey toward the heart of the anomaly. Every moment felt like an eternity, the ticking of the clock almost deafening in the silence of space. As they neared the center, the space outside the ship began to distort even further. The stars were no longer visible, replaced by an ever-growing sphere of swirling energy that seemed to be alive. "The heart of the anomaly is within reach." The hidden owl's voice returned, calm but distant. "You are ready, Captain." Dorian's hands were tense on the controls. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. "Ready for what?" he whispered to himself, though the question was meant for no one. Miri looked out the window, her face reflecting the growing dread. "I don't like this," she said softly. "It feels like we're walking straight into the mouth of the beast." Dorian didn't respond. He wasn't sure what they were walking into, but he knew they had no choice. They were already too far gone. The ship suddenly jerked, a sharp, violent lurch that rattled the crew to their bones. The systems flickered, and the air inside the cockpit grew thick with static. Outside, the sphere of energy had expanded, and tendrils of light now reached toward them, as if the anomaly were reaching for the ship itself. "Hold on!" Dorian shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The ship groaned, its frame creaking under the strain as it was pulled closer to the heart of the anomaly. The lights inside flickered wildly, casting eerie, intermittent shadows across the cockpit. Then, without warning, the strange energy seemed to pass through the ship itself. It wasn't like a physical force. It was more like a wave of consciousness, a deep, penetrating force that resonated through their minds. "You are here," the voice of the hidden ally echoed, but this time it was no longer comforting. There was a sharp edge to it, a hint of something darker. "The truth awaits." As the ship neared the center of the anomaly, the light from the tendrils grew brighter, and the crew was bathed in an eerie, almost otherworldly glow. The systems had gone silent, the hum of the ship now replaced by a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to echo in their bones. "What is this place?" Miri asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dorian didn't know how to answer. They had crossed some invisible line, entering a realm that defied comprehension. The hidden ally's voice returned, this time with an almost eerie clarity. "This is the heart of knowledge, Captain. Everything you seek lies here. You are here to understand, to evolve." Dorian's mind reeled. This was not just an anomaly. It was an ancient presence, a consciousness that had been waiting for them. It was too late to turn back now. They had come too far to deny the truth. Whatever it was, they would face it together. The voice of the hidden ally grew louder, more insistent. This is the beginning, Captain. All that you have known, all that you have believed, will be shattered. Will you embrace the truth? Dorian's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the decision bore down on him. This was no longer just about survival. It was about understanding, about unraveling the very fabric of the universe itself. But what if the truth was too much? What if it was something they weren't meant to understand? The crew was silent, each person lost in their own thoughts, each facing their own fears. Finally Dorian spoke, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "We've come this far," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "I don't know what lies ahead, but we have to see it through." The ship shuddered once more, as if in response, and then the light around them began to shift. The first step had been taken. The journey into the unknown was far from over. As the ship continued to pulse within the heart of the anomaly, the sensation of being watched grew unbearable. Dorian felt a strange clarity, as if he were seeing through a veil of reality. "You now understand," the hidden Allah's voice echoed once more. "The truth that lies beyond your comprehension has been shown to you. You are part of something much larger." Dorian's mind reeled. The information pouring into him was overwhelming. Secrets of the galaxy's creation, of ancient civilizations, of unimaginable power. His head spun with the weight of it. Miri, standing beside him, appeared equally shaken, her eyes wide with fear. "Is this what we were meant to find?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "Is this our purpose?" Dorian didn't answer at first. He couldn't. The knowledge was too vast, too alien. "Do not fear," the hidden ally reassured them. "What you choose to do with this power will determine the fate of the galaxy." Dorian closed his eyes, struggling to steady his breathing. They had learned so much, but the question was it too much for them to handle? The ship began to tremble once more, and the soft hum of the anomaly shifted into something more urgent. "You are ready," the hidden Allah's voice rang in their minds. "Test your power." Dorian felt a surge of energy rush through him, as if the ship itself had become an extension of his mind. The controls responded to his thoughts, the ship systems reacting before his hands even touched the panels. He could feel the energy swirling around them, pulsing with the heartbeat of the galaxy. "This is the first of many trials," the hidden ally intoned. "Control it, or it will consume you." The ship lurched, and the strange energy began to distort their surroundings. The fabric of space itself seemed to warp as though the laws of physics no longer applied. "What's happening?" Miri cried, her voice trembling as the ship began to spin erratically. "We're losing control." But Dorian, now connected to the anomaly, fought to steady the ship, pushing against the tide of energy that threatened to overwhelm them. The trial had begun. Dorian's hands trembled as the power surged through him. He could feel the force of the anomaly pushing against him, urging him to give in. "You are capable of so much more," the hidden Allah's voice whispered. "Release your full potential. Harness the power of the galaxy." Dorian's heart raced. He could feel it, the power of the universe at his fingertips. But with it came the overwhelming realization. He wasn't just controlling the ship anymore. He was controlling space, time, everything. "It's too much," Miri said, her voice panicked. "Dorian, stop." But Dorian didn't know if he could. The temptation to give in was overwhelming, and part of him wanted to let go, to embrace the power that beckoned. "We can do so much with this," he murmured, his voice distant. But even as he spoke, a small rational part of him screamed to resist, to remember who he was. "I don't know if we can handle this," he whispered, almost to himself. The power was too much for any one person to wield. It was corrupting him. As Dorian struggled to maintain control, Mira's voice cut through the fog of his thoughts. "Dorian, look!" she shouted. Dorian turned, his mind still clouded by the power, and his eyes widened in shock. On the ship's radar, a hidden vessel appeared, its shape dark and menacing, its energy signature unlike anything they had seen before. It's them, Miri whispered, her voice trembling. The betrayers. The crew's once hidden enemy had arrived. The ship they had thought lost to the galaxy's void was back, and it was here to take the power of the anomaly for themselves. Dorian's hands clenched, and for the first time in what felt like forever, his mind cleared. The hidden Allah's voice returned, now tinged with malice. They are not here to help, Captain. They are here to take what you have gained. Dorian's heart sank. He had been played. But it was too late to turn back. A battle for control of the anomaly was about to begin. The two ships now floated in the heart of the anomaly, each connected by the invisible threads of energy that coursed through the space around them. Dorian, his mind still reeling from the power he had briefly harnessed, knew that a fight was inevitable. We can't let them have it, Dorian muttered. Miri nodded. But we can't fight them here in this place. It will destroy us all. We don't have a choice, Dorian replied. The crew was already preparing for the worst, weapons armed, but the power of the anomaly seemed to distort their efforts. The two ships began to circle each other, the energy field surrounding them amplifying their movements. The fight had begun. Dorian felt the weight of the universe pressing down on him. The choice had been made. The truth had been revealed. Now they would fight to survive, or they would perish in the abyss. The two ships remained locked in place, swirling in the heart of the anomaly. Outside, the anomaly pulsated with increasing intensity, its dark energy feeding the escalating tension between the two forces. Dorian gripped the controls, his knuckles white with the strain. We can't keep this up, Miri said, her voice taut with fear. The anomaly is too unstable. If we don't end this now. She didn't finish her sentence, but the implications hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Dorian's mind was still clouded from the overwhelming power he had felt coursing through him. He fought the temptation to reach for it again, to seize control of the universe. We won't survive if we keep fighting like this, Dorian said, his voice low but firm. We need to outmaneuver them, not just face them head-on. Miri nodded, but her eyes were filled with doubt. If they're after the anomaly's power, what will happen if they take control of it? Dorian paused. Then, everything we know will cease to exist. The first blast rang out, ripping through the ship's shields, and Dorian's heart skipped a beat. He slammed his hands on the console, initiating evasive maneuvers as the enemy ship launched another round of fire. We need to get closer, Dorian growled, his eyes darting between the readouts. We can't outrun them in this thing. We need to fight back. The crew scrambled, preparing the weapons systems, but Dorian knew they were outmatched. The enemy ship had a distinct advantage. Its crew was prepared for this battle, and they had an edge in the anomaly. Miri looked at Dorian, her face set in determination. Dorian, remember what you felt earlier. You can control the energy of this place. Use it. His eyes narrowed. She was right, but could he really control the anomaly? Focus, the hidden Allah's voice echoed, and this time, it didn't feel comforting. You must tap into the power within you, Captain. Dorian hesitated, but the realization hit him like a thunderclap. If they were going to survive, he had no choice. Dorian closed his eyes for a brief moment, and he felt it, the pulse of the anomaly, deep and ancient, thrumming inside him. The power was not just a tool, it was a living thing, a force that connected everything in the universe. He reached for it, not with his hands, but with his mind. Harness it, the hidden Al's voice whispered, almost like a command. He took a deep breath, allowing the energy to flow through him, and in that moment, he felt limitless. The ship's systems came alive under his command, responding to his thoughts. The enemy ship fired again, but Dorian didn't flinch. He raised his hand, and the energy around them twisted, the blast of fire from the enemy ship deflecting away, dissipating into the dark void. Miri's eyes widened in disbelief. You did it, she whispered. But Dorian knew they hadn't won yet. The battle was far from over. The energy of the anomaly continued to surge, but Dorian could feel something else, something dark and wrong, lurking in the depths of the enemy ship. It wasn't just an opposing force. It was a part of the anomaly itself. What is that? Miri asked, her voice low with dread. Dorian didn't have an answer. "We warned you, Captain," the hidden Allah's voice said, now cold and distant. "There's a price for power. The betrayers have always known this. They are not what they seem." Dorian's mind reeled as the truth began to sink in. The enemy ship wasn't just after the anomaly's power, it was infected by it. The power had corrupted them, twisted their minds into something alien. The betrayal wasn't just a personal vendetta, it was part of something much larger. "If we don't stop them now, they'll bring about the destruction of everything," Dorian said, his voice filled with grim realization. They were up against more than just a rogue crew. They were facing a force from the heart of the anomaly itself. Dorian knew that the time for evasive maneuvers had passed. The enemy ship was no longer just a threat. It was a contagion, and it had to be destroyed before it could spread its corruption further. "Get ready," Dorian shouted to the crew, his voice now filled with the unshakable resolve of a leader who knew what had to be done. "We're going in." The ship's systems were under his command now, the power of the anomaly thrumming beneath his fingertips. He was ready to make the final stand. As the ships drew closer, Dorian could feel the energy of the anomaly swirling more violently, as though it was reacting to the impending conflict. The hidden Ali's voice was almost gone now, replaced by a cold, empty silence. "It's time to end this," Dorian muttered. The final confrontation had begun. The battle raged on, but Dorian's resolve was waning. The anomaly pulsed stronger, like a living entity, pushing them toward destruction. "It's alive," Miri whispered. "And angry." The ship shook violently. Dorian knew they couldn't keep this up much longer. The enemy ship was gaining strength from the anomaly itself. "We need to outsmart them, not just fight," Dorian said, determined. The odds were against them, but they had no choice. Dorian pushed the ship deeper into the anomaly's core. "What are you doing?" Miri gasped, but Dorian couldn't answer. The enemy followed, unaware of the danger. As they entered the anomaly's heart, reality began to warp, and Dorian realized they had been led here. The alliance had been shattered. There was no turning back. The anomaly's core radiated power, and Dorian felt it course through him. He closed his eyes, using the anomaly's energy to control the ship. "We can't survive this unless we fight back," Dorian said, redirecting an incoming blast back at the enemy. Miri watched, stunned, as Dorian harnessed the energy of the anomaly, shifting the tide of battle. The blast subsided, and the enemy ship was gone, disintegrated by the force Dorian had redirected. But there was no triumph, only an empty void. The power of the anomaly had left them broken. "Did we win?" Miri whispered. Dorian didn't answer. The price of survival had been too high. With the enemy gone, the crew was left to face the silence of space. "What now?" Miri asked. Dorian looked out at the stars, filled with a quiet determination. "We survive," he said. "We learn from this power, and we move forward." Their journey had changed them, but they would face the future together.